Hello everyone, Wayne Motts, the President Emeritus and Historian at the Gettysburg Foundation, coming to you from the work area, curatorial area here at the Gettysburg National Military Park with our friends, and you've seen them before on some of our videos. Mike Kwolek over here to my left, to your right, the museum specialist, and to my right, your left, Greg Goodell, the Gettysburg National Military Park Curator. And we've got 4 objects out here today that we want to talk about. And this is sort of a special edition of Museum Monday because we're going to talk about rotating exhibit items that are on exhibit right now, bringing items off and putting some new items on, because there are a heck of a lot of items that are here in the curatorial storage area and also for the preservation of the artifacts. So, and I think that's where we ought to start. Greg, maybe you can tell the viewers, because I'm not sure they're familiar with the program that we have here, when you're able to do that, to rotate items, why that's important, what it is, and we've got about how many items on display upstairs, and what's that look like?
So right now, we've got a little over 1,000 pieces upstairs in the galleries and in the open storage areas of the museum. The interesting thing about it is that, or the important thing to note about it is that the material makeup of some of those pieces doesn't allow for them to be out for indefinite periods of time because of their physical stability and the problems that can come to organic materials with prolonged exposure to light and to certain temperatures and what have you. So there are certain artifacts in every museum where there is a need, based on the organic nature of the piece, for it to be rotated off of exhibits so that it can rest. It can be in a dark place. It can be in a little bit more stable climate, although the climate of our museum galleries is pretty stable, and it's designed that way. But that's a principle in the museum field, and there are going to be other examples in this collection and in every collection of pieces where that wasn't followed, where damage can be seen. So we're trying to avoid that now, and we purposely built the museum exhibits to try to help facilitate that process, make it easier. So again, it's mostly driven by the physical nature of the object, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we look at the pieces themselves.
And so the curators usually would have a listing of these materials, and those that are more sensitive would get rotated more often. Obviously, folks, if you were 160 years old, how would you look? After
That's true.
After being on display.
That's right.
This stuff deteriorates just like anything else does.
It's inevitable.
And it's got to be taken care of. And these microclimates that have been created down here, which are very important, can extend the life of these objects. But from the day they're made, they're going to deteriorate. The only question is how can it be can it be arrested? When it comes to that type of deterioration, and depending on what the material is, it could be more so than others.
Correct. Yes.
And think about it too. It's like, museum collections and museum exhibits themselves. Think of it as like a bank that you can only make withdrawals from. You can never make deposits back into the bank. So we're in a forever business. We're trying to keep these objects around as long as we possibly can for future generations. And at some point, if you leave this stuff out there, you're just constantly withdrawing off of that bank account. Eventually, there's nothing there.
That's a good analogy, and I think it's probably fair to say that if you had a piece of metal, a cannon, probably less likely it needs to be rotated than if you have a piece of fabric or paper or something of that.
Exactly.
Talk a little bit about it. Now,
and I'll also add too, if I could, Wayne, the fact that we also want to think about our museum galleries as spaces that are continually inviting. So what that means is that our goal is to try as best as we can to not only meet the preservation needs, but refresh content for our visitors. So that we might have a repeat visitor that has been coming to us for many, many years, and it gives them an opportunity to experience something new in the gallery spaces.
So why don't we talk a little bit about the objects that are here at the table. And Greg, why don't we start with the painting?
Okay, start with the painting.
That's next to you. Now this one is going on display, correct?
Correct.
Going on. This one's going on.
This is going on. So as visitors to our museum will know, or for those of you who have not been to our museum will find out when you come, we talk about the Battle of Gettysburg in the larger context of the Civil War and the conflict and the issues of the conflict. And one of the aspects of that discussion is talking about the war beyond Gettysburg, both before and after 1863. The painting that you see here is something that is speaking to the conflict prior to Gettysburg. This is a painting called The Return to Fredericksburg, and it is painted by a gentleman named David English Henderson. And David English Henderson was born in Jefferson County, Virginia, what is now West Virginia. Lived there his entire life, with the exception of the time that he served in the Army of Northern Virginia during the Civil War. He had initially enlisted in the 2nd Virginia Infantry at the start of the conflict, but quickly became a topographical engineer. And why was he a topographical engineer? Well, a lot of times when you have such artistic talent as this, you were drafted into making maps. So very quickly he became a topographical engineer in the Army of Northern Virginia. He painted a couple of studies of Fredericksburg relative to the Battle of Fredericksburg in the latter part of 1862, early 1863. One of these, this Return from Fredericksburg, shows a family returning to their home after the battle, which was an urban, fought in an urban setting in many ways, the Battle of Fredericksburg. And again, we have a collection here at Gettysburg National Military Park that is fairly broad in its topical coverage of things in the Civil War. While it is heavily oriented towards Gettysburg, it has pieces such as this in it that speak to areas beyond Gettysburg. But what's so interesting about this is not only the beautiful color of it, the setting speaking to this whole idea of the impact of war on civilian populations.
Because you see the damage.
You see the damage, right. You see the damage. You see the family returning, having to sort of process the loss. What is also very interesting about this is the accuracy of the interior presentation. So this is a very accurate recreation of a typical middle-class, small-town America, 19th century interior as it would have appeared at the time of the Civil War.
Wow. So this one's going on.
This is going on to exhibit.
So let's talk about one that's coming off a display if we can, and that's this particular drum. And remember that the Museum of the American Civil War upstairs is very broad. So it talks about the causes and consequences of the Civil War. It talks about pre-Civil War, and that's sort of what this drum is, correct? Mike, do you want to say a few words?
So we have, it's referred to as the Scotch Legion's drum. Basically, you have this nice motif here on the front of it, and it's the main reason why we're rotating off, because you have the panes on here are going to be susceptible to light damage. Same thing for the actual top of the drum as well, too, with the wood and your leather as well. Plus, there is an inscription on top of the drum, and all this can fade over time and so forth. So we want to rotate this off, give it a rest period, and get it off display. But basically is that this drum came from the gallery space talking about the Mexican-American War and then the expansion of slavery that came with that as well, or the conflicts about the expansion of slavery. So this drum was used during the Mexican-American War, and then during the opening phases of the American Civil War after Fort Sumter, this drum is being used in Philadelphia to raise troops for what's known as Scots Legion. This will be coming off, and then we'll be putting in this model 1832 chapeau in its place.
That belonged to Major General Robert Patterson, who, and I know a little bit about him. He was born in Ireland in 1792. His parents came to the United States when he was very young in 1798. He became a Pennsylvania militia officer and a volunteer officer in the Mexican War. Now, he's also an officer in the Civil War. So, Mike, what do we know about this chapeau? This is going to go in an exhibit upstairs. What part?
Yeah, so this is replacing the drum we were just talking about, the Scott Legion's drum. This is going into the case, of course, describing the Mexican-American War and then its causes and consequences as far as, expansion of American territory, and then are those territories going to have slavery in them? As you said before, Robert Patterson, his family immigrated from Ireland, or actually exiled from Ireland because of activities against the crown. They will settle in Philadelphia. He said before, he serves in the War of 1812, and then he will be wearing this chapeau during his military career while he's in Mexico during the Mexican-American War. Afterwards, he goes back to Philadelphia. He's actually going to be involved. Oh, actually, a little bit earlier, he's involved too in suppressing the nativist riots in Philadelphia in 1844, which of course is a backlash against, Irish and Catholics in Philadelphia. So he's involved in suppressing those riots. And then later on, of course, he serves in the American Civil War. He's probably one of the heroes of Bull Run, if you want to take it that way, depending on which side you're on. He's basically charged to try to hold up Johnson's army in the Shenandoah Valley and, of course, around Harper's Ferry. He does not do this, and he allows Johnson then to link up with Beauregard. And, of course, then you have your Confederate victory at the Battle of First Manassas, or Bull Run. So the hat is made out of beaver felt, and it has this beautiful cockade on the front of it, and then you have these nice bullion tassels on either side.
In between his military affairs, he had a tremendous business. He had like cotton plantations and sugar. And
he had sugar plantations that he actually owned, and then he had cotton mills in the Philadelphia region. Yeah. And then his wife's family actually is from Tennessee. They're also Irish immigrants as well, but his wife's family actually owned slaves in Tennessee. Wow. So what we're trying to tell the story with the chapeau and his story is the interconnectivity between, southern slave-produced cotton and then northern industrialists, and how this is all kind of coalescing together in the nation in the 1850s going into the 1860s.
And I understand he lives to be a really old man and is buried over in Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is where George Meade and another number of other famous folks are buried. So.
He's also, his house that he had in Philadelphia, he will then bequeath to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania too, and it's his first actual location there in the city as well.
Oh, wow.
So a pretty notable guy as far as city politics in Philadelphia.
All right, and once again, what we talked about before, this is going to replace another piece of fabric that's on there, so it's going to stay for a while and be rotated off again. But let's talk a little bit about this naval jacket. Now, this is a pre-Civil War naval jacket, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's a pattern model 1852.
Okay.
Naval officers' dress cutaway frock. So that was owned by a gentleman named Thomas Ware, and Thomas Ware was a naval officer in the U.S. Navy prior to the Civil War. He was a Southerner and resigned his commission, like many officers of Southern birth and Southern origin did. When the Confederacy formed and when the conflict began. And he found himself also doing a similar job in the Confederate Navy as a purser and paymaster. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us the opportunity to talk about that formation of the Confederacy. And there's another coat up there now with a similar story behind it that is going to come off, have its rest period, and then Thomas Ware's coat will help, and Thomas Ware's story will help us tell that story.
So I looked up Ware, I did a little lookup on him, and it was interesting you got this painting of Fredericksburg because that's where Ware was born and where he was from, and he died in the 1880s. There and is buried in Fredericksburg in Episcopal Cemetery. That's there. But Greg, the records I saw have him entering the naval service in 1853. So you say this is a model 1852 jacket. Right. It seems like fits that story very, very closely. And that's going on in another. Is it another coat?
Another coat. Another coat of a Confederate officer, again talking about the formation of the Confederacy, is going to be coming off of exhibition.
So for this Museum Monday segment, we've got 4 objects here. At least one of them has come off of exhibit, and 3 of them are going on, and we're going to show you a little bit about that. But you just heard what I think is fascinating when it comes to material culture curator, museum specialist. We've got Jennifer Weaver here, also our museum technician down here. So there's a behind-the-scenes crew, everybody, that are putting these on up there in the exhibit area for you all to see. And there's a great deal of care, a great deal of responsibility that comes with stewardships of these objects to make sure they're here forever. So we really appreciate your time, both of you here this morning, and we appreciate you following us on social media. Thank you very much on behalf of the Gettysburg Foundation, and we want to thank our partners, the Gettysburg National Military Park, the staff here, who's keeping everything up and running up in the Museum of the American Civil War. And let me tell you something, there's a huge amount of behind the scenes work going on. So when you're up there enjoying those objects, you've got no idea how much work is going on down here in the curatorial area. But you know what? You don't need to. Just enjoy it and support the foundation and the park. So thank you very much.